Master the technique for this simple chicken curry and you'll be able to make any curry. This is also known as chicken kasalan in Urdu, which is literally chicken curry or curry of chicken. So I'm going to use chicken drumsticks. You could use a whole cut up chicken with the bone in. Traditionally, it is bone in. Drumsticks are just very easy, but I like to take the skin off and I like to wash them. So you just want to pull as much skin off as you can with your hand, and then I use kitchen shears to take off the last bit of the skin around the end, but you don't want to take all of this skin off around the very end of the drumstick, because that's kind of like what's keeping it together. So I'm going to show you just a little bit that I leave on it right there, and that is enough. I also like to wash the chicken, especially bone-in chicken, so I'm going to place it in a metal bowl, and you can watch my full chicken washing tutorial that I have on my profile if you want to see the in-depth, but it does make it easier to remove these slimy membranes when you soak the chicken in water for a little bit. So just watch that video if you want to see that in-depth tutorial. And then I'm going to slice an onion. Just one large onion is enough. And this is about 5 pounds of chicken with the bone in. And I think it was about 12 drumsticks, so 1 onion is plenty. And we're just going to slice it as thin as possible, because when it cooks down, we want it to almost disintegrate into the food. So as thin as you can slice it. And then I have 4 tomatoes out, but I actually ended up only using 3, because 3 medium to large tomatoes is plenty for this amount of chicken. And I'm just going to dice it into small cubes. And again, this is a very simple recipe, so we're only adding onions and tomato and then some cilantro at the end to garnish. So I'm going to move over to the stove, and you need a pretty large pot for this amount of chicken. Also wide is good. And I'm going to add my onions to some hot oil. You don't want it to be overly oily, although some people do make chicken kasalan with a lot of oil. You'll see it's like kind of liquidy, and then it has a layer of oil on the top. I don't prefer it that way. I like it more like a little bit of a thicker curry with less oil, but you can do it to your preference. So I'm going to add just enough oil to fry the onions and make them brown. And I added the lid just to help the onions cook a little bit faster. And I got them to a light golden brown color. This is plenty brown. You don't have to make them browner than this for this dish. So I'm just going to saute them a little bit more, and then I'm going to add 1 heaping tablespoon of ginger garlic paste. And this is the combined ginger and garlic paste, but if you have them separate, you would just add 1 tablespoon of each. And then I'll saute that into the onions to cook out the raw taste of the paste. And with my heat on high, I will add my chicken. And instead of just pouring the whole bowl, I added it individually by hand because there was still some water left in the bowl. That's why I did that. And you can see even with a wide pot like this, it was still a little bit crowded, but that's okay. It was plenty of space for it to cook thoroughly. And I added 1 tablespoon of garam masala. Then I added 2 teaspoons of coriander and 2 teaspoons of cumin. And the reason I said if you master this technique, you can make any curry, because if you can do this, you can make any Pakistani curry. These are the basic spices. This is half a teaspoon of red chili powder. Then I'm going to add half a teaspoon of turmeric. Then I'm adding 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm using the pink Pakistani salt here. You can do this to your taste. And then I'm going to add half a teaspoon of black pepper, but that's not even traditional. The black pepper is just extra. But if you add those first spices that I put, the coriander, cumin, garam masala, red chili powder, turmeric, you can make any Pakistani curry, any Pakistani salan with that combination of spices and salt. So you just have to learn the technique, and then you can make it with beef. You can make it with mutton. I don't really make mutton that often, or ever actually. Chicken is what I like the most, but my point is that it's really all about the technique. And then I'm going to add my chopped tomatoes after the chicken has had a chance to saute for about 5 minutes. And then I'm just going to stir those tomatoes in, and I have some hot water boiling in the kettle right now. And then I'm going to add just enough water to barely cover the chicken. The more water you add, the more you're going to have to reduce the salan or the curry later to make it thicker. So, but you still want to have enough water for it to cook thoroughly. So you kind of just have to get a feel for the water level, but I like it like this, just barely covering the chicken. It's not completely submerged because the steam is going to cook it. So I'm turning my heat all the way up to high to build up a very strong simmer. And then I'm going to add the lid, and then I'm going to reduce my heat to medium and allow it to simmer for 20 minutes. That's plenty for the chicken to cook all the way through. Then after 20 minutes of simmering, we can remove the lid, and you'll see it's still very watery. It should smell amazing at this point though. Like that combination of spices is just an amazing aroma. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my heat up to high, and I'm going to allow this to simmer uncovered for maybe a good 10 to 15 minutes to allow most of the water to evaporate and make the curry a little bit thicker. You can do it to your desired thickness. You can reduce it as much as you want. Give it a little bit of a stir, and also just be careful because drumsticks are fragile. Like they'll break if you stir them too aggressively. So I'm kind of just like using my spoon to lift under them, but I'm not like breaking the chicken. Okay, so after it's simmered for a good 15 to 20 minutes, I turn the heat off, and then I'm adding some cilantro for garnish. And that is really all there is to it. That's how you make a basic Pakistani curry or a salan. Let me know what you think of this recipe in the comments if you do anything differently with your chicken ka salan.